I floored the gas pedal and ran a red light, my 7-year-old son, Danny, limp in the back seat, his lips turning blue. "Stay with me, buddy. Dad's got you. We're almost there." My voice cracked on the last word. He'd been complaining of chest pain since dinner, then just collapsed. No warning. 1 second he was reaching for his glass of water, the next he was on the kitchen floor, eyes rolling back. The hospital was 4 miles away. I was going to make it in 2 minutes. And what I didn't know, what I couldn't have possibly imagined, was that my wife, Carla, was on the phone with the police at that exact moment, reporting my car stolen. The car her son was dying in. 6 months before that night, life looked different. Carla and I had been married for 9 years. I worked construction management, overseeing projects across the county, pulling 60-hour weeks to keep us in the 4-bedroom house she'd insisted we needed, or to fund the private school she'd decided Danny deserved, to pay for the vacations she planned and the wardrobe she curated. I didn't complain. That was my job. I was the provider. I was the foundation. We'd met in our mid-20s, fallen hard, married fast. Danny came along in year 2 and became the center of my entire universe. Whatever friction existed between Carla and me, and there was friction increasingly, Danny smoothed it over. I stayed, I worked, I built, I trusted her completely. 2 weeks before the night she tried to have me arrested, she'd kissed me goodbye at the front door, told me she loved me, reminded me to pick up Danny from soccer practice. Normal Tuesday, normal life. Or so I believed. And now Danny was coding in the back seat of my truck, and I was pulling into Mercy General's emergency lot at 70 miles an hour, not knowing cops were already on their way. I threw the truck into park at the ER entrance and yanked Danny out of the back seat, his body frighteningly light. A nurse outside on a smoke break saw me coming and dropped her cigarette. "He collapsed. Chest pain. He's 7. I was already inside before I finished the sentence. They took him from my arms at the desk. A team materialized from nowhere. A gurney appeared, and suddenly Danny was being wheeled through double doors, and I was standing in the waiting room with my heart ripped out of my chest. "Sir, we need you to fill out. He's my son. His name is Daniel Calloway. He's 7 years old. No known allergies. No prior heart conditions." I gave them everything I knew in 30 seconds flat. Hands shaking, voice steady because I would not fall apart. Not yet. Not until I knew he was okay. I called Carla while they worked on him. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted. "Danny collapsed. At Mercy General. Get here now." No response. I paced the waiting room, still in my work boots and dusty jeans, calling her every 2 minutes. Nothing. I told myself she'd left her phone in the car. I told myself she was already driving. I told myself a dozen things that turned out to be lies. 15 minutes after I carried my son through those doors, 2 police cruisers pulled into the parking lot outside the emergency room windows. I watched them absently, the way you watch anything when your brain is too full of terror to process normal information. Then I watched the officers get out and start walking toward the entrance, and something in my gut went cold before my mind caught up. They came straight to me. "Are you Michael Calloway?" "Yes, what?" "Sir, we received a report of a stolen vehicle. A 2021 Ford F250, registered to Carla Calloway, currently parked in this lot. We're going to need you to come with us." I stared at the officer. I genuinely could not process what he'd just said. "My son," I said carefully, as if maybe they hadn't heard me, "is in that emergency room right now. He coded on the way here. He is 7 years old, and the doctors are working on him right now." "Sir, we still need—" "That truck is registered in both our names. My name is on that registration. Call the DMV right now. Pull it up." My voice had dropped to something very quiet and very dangerous. My son is in that room, and you are going to let me stand here until I know he's alive. Or you are going to explain to every news camera in this city why you dragged a father out of an emergency room while his child was dying. The officers exchanged a look. One of them stepped aside and got on his radio. I turned back to the window, into the ER, watching the controlled chaos around my son's bay, hands clenched at my sides. The officer came back 5 minutes later. Mr. Calloway, the vehicle is registered jointly. We're going to need to get a statement from your wife to clarify the situation. You do that, I said. Where is she? Did she call from our house? Another look between them. She called from a location on the east side of town. I lived on the west side. I turned that information over in my mind like a stone I wasn't ready to flip yet. East side. 9:30 at night. My son coding in the ER. Her phone going straight to voicemail when I called. The ER doctor came out 40 minutes later. Danny had gone into a severe arrhythmia, an undetected heart condition nobody knew he had. They'd stabilized him. He was going to need a procedure, possibly surgery, but he was alive. He was stable. I sat down in a plastic waiting room chair and put my face in my hands and shook for about 30 seconds. Then I stood up, thanked the doctor, asked every question I needed to ask, and made a decision. I was done pretending I didn't know what was happening. Where Carla walked into the hospital at 11:15. I was standing at the end of the hallway when she came through the automatic doors, still in the clothes she'd left the house in that morning. Except she'd fixed her makeup. Who fixes their makeup before rushing to their child's hospital bedside? She saw me, and something crossed her face. Not relief. Not the look of a mother who'd been terrified for hours. It was something more like recalibration, like she was deciding what expression to wear. Or, Mike, the police told me you reported the truck stolen. I didn't raise my voice. The hallway was quiet, and I kept it that way. You reported it stolen at 9:47. Danny collapsed at 9:32. I texted you at 9:34 that I was bringing him here. So at the moment you called the police and reported my truck stolen, you already knew I had our son in it and was driving to the emergency room. She opened her mouth. Don't, I said. Don't do whatever you were about to do. I want to know where you were tonight. I went out with friends. My phone died. Which friends? You don't know them. Try me. She pulled her coat tighter. Mike, our son is in the hospital. We should focus on... I am focused. I've been focused on Danny since 9:32. I need you to answer me right now. Where were you tonight? And why did you report my truck stolen while I was driving our son to the emergency room? Her jaw tightened. I didn't know you had the truck. I thought it was taken from the driveway. You got my text at 9:34. I can see you read it. The read receipt is right there on my phone. The silence that followed was about 4 seconds long. 4 seconds where I watched everything I thought I knew about my marriage rearrange itself into a shape I recognized but hadn't wanted to name. Who is he? I asked. Mike. Who is he, Carla? She looked at the floor, and that was its own kind of answer. His name, what I found out over the next 3 days, was Derek. He worked in finance. They'd been together, and I use that word with full contempt, for 8 months. 8 months of my life that I'd spent working double shifts, coaching Danny's soccer team on Saturdays, fixing the deck in the backyard, planning a family vacation to the coast that we'd never taken because she kept saying she was too busy. 8 months. I didn't fall apart. I want to be clear about that. And I had a son in a hospital bed who needed his father functional and present. And I was not going to give Carla or Derek or anyone else the satisfaction of watching me crumble. I sat with Danny every day. I learned everything the cardiologists told me. I held my son's hand and read him his favorite books and told him he was the toughest kid I'd ever met. In the margins of that, early mornings, late nights in the hospital parking lot. I made calls. The first call was to my brother, Ray. I laid out what I knew, what I suspected, what I needed. "Tell me what to do," Ray said. "I need you to find out everything you can about Derek. Full name, employer, home address, how long this has actually been going on." "Done," Ray said. "What else?" "I need a divorce attorney, the best family law attorney in the county. Get me a name by tomorrow morning." The attorney's name was Patricia Holt. She'd been practicing family law for 22 years and had the kind of quiet confidence that comes from having won fights that looked unwinnable. I met with her while Danny was in a therapy session on day 4 of his hospital stay. I laid out everything: the marriage, the finances, the house, the fact that Carla had called the police and reported my vehicle stolen while our son was in medical distress in it. Patricia's expression didn't change much, but her pen moved faster. "The stolen vehicle report," she said. "That's significant. Depending on the responding officer's documentation, that could speak to fitness as a parent. Making a false police report is also a criminal matter." "I want everything documented," I said. "I want this done correctly." "We'll subpoena the 911 call," she said. "We'll get the phone records. We'll build a timeline." Meanwhile, Ray had been busy. Derek's full name was Derek Fontaine. He was a senior analyst at Meridian Capital. I'm married, yes, married, with 2 kids of his own. His wife's name was Joanne. She had no idea. I sat with that information for exactly 24 hours. I thought about what kind of man I wanted to be when this was over. I thought about Joanne, who was living the same lie I had been, except she hadn't found out yet. I thought about what I would want someone to do if our positions were reversed. Then I sent Joanne Fontaine a certified letter with documentation enclosed, and copies of texts I'd pulled from Carla's backed-up phone account. She'd used the same password for everything, a fact I'd always found endearing and now found useful. Date-stamped, thorough, irrefutable. I didn't do it out of cruelty. I did it because she deserved to know. Because every day she didn't know was another day someone was stealing her life. Her attorney contacted Carla's phone the next week. I know because Carla called me furious, voice high and cracked, on demanding to know if I'd contacted Derek's wife. "We're not discussing your affair," I said calmly. "Anything you need to say to me goes through Patricia Holt. You have her number." I hung up. The next move was financial. We had joint accounts, a joint mortgage, and joint investments I'd built over 9 years of 60-hour weeks. I'd spoken to Patricia about what I could and couldn't touch before the divorce was finalized, and I moved carefully within those lines. But I did close the joint credit card, the one she'd been using to fund what I now understood were not girls' trips, but weekends with Derek. I documented every charge from the past 8 months and handed it to Patricia. Hotels, restaurants, a weekend in the mountains, charging all of it to an account I was paying into. Patricia's eyes got sharp when she saw the total. "This is marital waste," she said. "We'll use this." Derek, meanwhile, was having a bad month. His wife had filed for divorce, and that news had reached his professional circle. I didn't make any calls to his employer. I didn't need to. Joanne's divorce attorney had apparently been thorough in depositions, and the details had a way of moving on their own in a city this size. Meridian Capital had a morality clause in senior employee contracts. Derek was placed on administrative leave within 2 weeks of Joanne filing. I heard this from Ray, who heard it from a mutual contact. I filed it away without much feeling, or that wasn't the point. The point was that the truth had consequences, and I wasn't going to be the one absorbing all of them anymore. Danny came home after 12 days. He'd need medication, monitoring, and a minor cardiac procedure scheduled for 6 weeks out. But he was home. He walked through the front door of our house, looked up at me with those serious, dark eyes he'd had since birth, and said, "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" I crouched down to his level. Yeah, buddy, we are. But here's what's not changing. I am always going to be your dad. You're always going to have me. That part is permanent. He thought about this for a moment. Then he nodded, the way he nodded when he'd understood something important, and went to find his Legos. Kids are resilient in ways that put adults to shame. Carla had moved out while Danny was still in the hospital. I'd had Ray stay at the house to make sure nothing was removed that shouldn't be. Furniture, electronics, our documents. And everything had proceeded without incident. She'd gone to her sister's place. Fine. Good. The distance helped everyone. What didn't help was her next move. 2 weeks after Danny came home, I got a call from Patricia. She's claiming primary custody, Patricia said. Her attorney is arguing that your work schedule makes you an inconsistent caregiver. I laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. My work schedule. I know, we'll respond accordingly. But I want you prepared. I was prepared. I'd been preparing since the night in the hospital parking lot. I had documentation of every school pickup, every doctor's appointment, every soccer practice, every homework session for the past 3 years. Not because I'd been planning this, but because I was an organized person who kept records, and those records now painted a very clear picture of who had been showing up in Danny's life. But Patricia filed our response with 3 years of documented parental involvement, 2 character witnesses from Danny's school, a letter from his soccer coach, and, most critically, the 911 call record and the police incident report from the night at Mercy General, which clearly showed that Carla had filed a stolen vehicle report at 9:47 p.m., despite having received a text message 13 minutes earlier informing her that her husband was transporting their son to the emergency room. The custody hearing was scheduled for 2 months out. In those 2 months, I restructured my life. I spoke to my boss, a man named Grant, who'd known me for 7 years, and we renegotiated my schedule. I moved to a hybrid model, job site visits 3 days a week, remote project management 2 days. Less money in the short term. Non-negotiable for where I was in my life. I got Danny into weekly therapy with a child psychologist who specialized in family transitions. She told me after the 3rd session that Danny was processing better than most kids she saw, and that the stability of his primary home environment was a major factor. I made sure that environment was as stable as I could make it. Same routines, same bedtime, same Saturday morning pancakes. I started running again, something I hadn't done since before Danny was born. Just 30 minutes a day at first, then an hour. It wasn't about the weight or the appearance. It was about having something that was mine, something that cleared my head, something that reminded me my body was capable and my mind was sharp and I was still standing. My friends showed up in ways I hadn't expected. Men I'd known for years, some of whom I'd assumed were just work contacts, called and showed up with food, with practical help, with quiet company on evenings when the house felt too large. My neighbor Tom, who I'd waved to for 5 years without much more than small talk, started including Danny in weekend activities with his own kids. That meant more to me than he probably knew. I also had one conversation I'd been putting off. I drove to Joanne Fontaine's house. I had her address from Ray, and I knocked on her door. She answered in jeans and a sweatshirt, eyes tired but steady, a woman holding herself together through sheer determination. I recognized the look. "I wanted to check on you," I said, "and to say I'm sorry you're going through this." She looked at me for a long moment. "You're Mike." "Yes." "You sent me the letter." "Yes." She let out a long breath. "I was angry at you for about 2 days," she said. "Then I thought about how much longer I would have gone on not knowing, and the anger shifted to the right person." She paused. "Your son, how is he doing?" "He's doing well. Thank you for asking." "I'm glad." She looked out toward the street. I wouldn't have wanted you to find out the way I did and not say something to me. That would have been the cowardly version. We didn't hug. We didn't exchange numbers. We were two people who'd been dealt the same hand by connected circumstances, acknowledging each other before walking back to our separate lives. But something about that conversation closed a door in me that needed closing. I'd done the hard thing because it was right. That mattered. Or the divorce mediation happened before the custody hearing. Carla came in with her attorney, a slick man who specialized in high-conflict divorces and was clearly expecting a fight. He got paperwork instead. Patricia had built a case so thorough, so documented, so precise, that by the end of the first 3-hour session, Carla's attorney was speaking to her in low tones, with an expression that said, "We need to recalibrate." But the marital waste claim, the 8 months of joint credit card charges for hotels, restaurants, and weekend trips, came to $63,000. Money I had earned working the hours she had characterized as making me an inconsistent parent. Patricia put the charges on a projected screen in that conference room and went through them line by line. Carla stared at the table. The stolen vehicle report came up next. The 911 call had been subpoenaed. Patricia had the transcript. She read the relevant portion aloud. The timestamp. Carla's voice stating that her vehicle had been taken, that she believed it was stolen from the driveway, that she hadn't spoken to her husband. 13 minutes after reading a text message telling her exactly where her husband and son were. The responding officers were dispatched to Mercy General Emergency, Patricia said, where my client was waiting for news on his son's cardiac event. This is the documented record of that dispatch. Carla's attorney asked for a recess. They came back with a substantially different proposal. I got the house. I got primary custody. I got a parenting plan that gave Carla structured visitation because Danny needed his mother in his life, regardless of what she'd done to me. But the primary decision-making authority, the primary residence, the day-to-day raising of our son, that was mine. On the marital asset division accounted for the documented waste. My retirement accounts, which I had built over years of consistent contribution, remained mine. Carla didn't fight it. Her attorney had apparently done the math on how a custody trial would go, with that 911 recording in evidence. I signed the final divorce decree on a Thursday afternoon in Patricia Holt's conference room. I shook Patricia's hand. I drove to Danny's school to pick him up. When he came out through the double doors and saw me waiting by the truck, he actually ran across the parking lot and launched himself at me like a missile. And I caught him and held on and thought, this is what I'm building toward. This right here. "Good day?" I asked. "I got an A on my science project," he said into my shoulder. "That's my boy." Carla tried, twice, to have a real conversation with me in the months that followed. The first time was in the parking lot after one of Danny's checkups, when she approached me while Danny was still inside getting his jacket. She looked smaller than I remembered, tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. "I need you to know that I never meant for... Carla." I stopped her gently, but absolutely. "Whatever you need to say, you can say it in co-parenting communication through the app Patricia set up, about Danny's schedule and Danny's needs. But that's the only conversation I'm available for." "I'm trying to apologize." "I know, but an apology doesn't change what happened, and I don't need it. I'm not angry anymore, I'm just done." I looked at her steadily. "Danny needs us to be functional as co-parents. That's what I'm focused on. I'll see you Thursday for the exchange." I walked back inside to get my son. The second time she tried, 6 months later, she left a long voicemail. I listened to it once. She sounded broken, genuinely broken, and I recognized the voice of someone living with consequences they hadn't anticipated. She'd lost the marriage. She'd lost the house. Derek had reconciled with his wife, or tried to. I'd heard they were still working through it, and had made clear he wasn't leaving Joanne. which meant Carla had detonated her life for someone who wasn't going to catch her on the other side. I didn't call back. Not out of cruelty. I genuinely mean that. And I just had nothing to say that would help her, and I was no longer responsible for managing her pain. That job had ended when she made her choices. A year after the night at Mercy General, my life looked like this. Danny had his cardiac procedure and came through it cleanly. His cardiologist said his long-term prognosis was excellent with proper medication and monitoring. He was back at soccer, back at school, making friends with the easy confidence of a kid who knows he's loved. His therapist had started transitioning him to monthly check-ins instead of weekly, which she said was a good sign. I had completed a project management certification I'd been putting off for 3 years, which resulted in a promotion that actually improved my salary despite the reduced on-site hours. I was running 5 days a week. I'd lost weight I hadn't realized I was carrying, and gained something steadier in its place, a kind of groundedness, a comfort in my own skin that I think had been eroding slowly for years in a marriage where I was always trying to be enough and never quite landing there. I'd started seeing a woman named Claire, slowly and carefully, exactly as slowly and carefully as that kind of thing deserved. She was a physical therapist who'd treated Danny during his recovery. She was patient and grounded and had no interest in drama, which was the most attractive quality I could imagine in a human being. As we were taking our time, it was good. Tom's kids had folded Danny into their friend group entirely, which meant most Saturday afternoons looked like a controlled riot in my backyard, which I loved with my whole chest. Ray came over for dinner every other Sunday. My mother visited for 2 weeks in the fall and declared that I looked healthier than I had in years. She wasn't wrong. I heard about Carla occasionally, through channels I didn't seek out. She'd moved to an apartment across town. Well, she was working. She'd always been capable. Whatever else was true. She had Danny every other weekend, and was, by Danny's account, present and engaged during those visits, which was all I needed to know. I didn't track her life. I didn't need to. Derek Fontaine had eventually left Meridian Capital. The administrative leave had stretched into a quiet exit. I didn't know where he'd landed. I didn't particularly care. His choices had cost him things, the way choices do. That wasn't my doing. That was just gravity. One evening, about 14 months after everything, Danny and I were sitting on the back deck after dinner. He was doing something with a Rubik's Cube. He'd become obsessed with solving it, and I was drinking coffee and watching the light go down over the tree line. "Dad," he said, not looking up from the cube. "Yeah." "Were you scared? That night when I was sick?" I looked at my son. This serious, tough, brilliant little person who had my eyes and his grandmother's stubbornness and his own particular way of thinking about things. "Yeah," I said honestly. "That was the most scared I've ever been in my life." He nodded, still working the cube. "I don't really remember it. That's okay. I remember enough for both of us." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm glad you drove fast." Something cracked open in my chest and reassembled itself in about 2 seconds. "Me too, buddy." He solved the cube, unshowed it to me, and went inside for a glass of water, completely satisfied with the conversation. I sat on the deck for a while longer, in the quiet of a life that was genuinely mine. Smaller in some ways than I'd imagined, larger in the ways that mattered, and I thought about what it meant to come through something. Not to win, exactly. Not revenge, though consequences had landed where they belonged. Just to come through. To still be standing on your own deck, coffee in hand, heard your kids' footsteps on the kitchen floor, the future wide open and yours to build. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.